Week been
Cold and chilly.
really? How come?
Bangalore is cold.
Oh, come on. Are you calling 24 degrees cold now? And
Morning is very cold. Yeah.
I keep hearing from my friends only there. So a lot of people have had to return to work now in Bangalore, and they're all cribbing. And the only thing that they say is like, weather's good, but traffic is bad. You don't get cabs, you don't get anything. So they're like,
Yeah,
we
you don't get anything, and on top of that, rains.
yeah. So I've just been talking to people, and they're like very frustrated with the city at the moment, especially with finding houses and all. Also, so it's in a bad shape.
Exactly.
All right, folks, we have a couple of topics that we will cover today, which is just about something like shift left, bug bounty, consent management, privacy policies. Then we will get into subscribing for SSO. If you remember, we had set up a Dev Okta account. So we will integrate that into our SSO and understand how SAML 2.0 works. We'll also look at how we can provide third-party vendors access in a neat way. And finally, we'll move on to backups, etc. So how do we do backups? How do we restore? How do we set up active workloads, etc. in multi regions? So we look at that. There's also one more topic left, which is around key management. So specifically to the topic around secret management, that's what we look at as well. Before all of that, I just wanted to discuss a scenario with all of you. So for the last almost 48 hours, we have been facing a DDoS in our Turkey region. So this is basically markets which operate in Turkey and in Spain. So started off at on around 4th early morning at around 3:30 4 a.m. I'll just show you some trends. So this is what things look like. So this started off around 4th early morning for us. That is around 3:30 a.m. our time. Progressively came up, auto mitigations, etc. triggered in. This went away by about 6:30 p.m. completely. We saw normal traffic again. Uh, Post that, it again triggered up with a much more wilder access level this time. And this is like peak business hours for Turkey at this point in time, although it's evening for us. So this is like Turkey, almost like what about 1 p.m., 2 p.m. for them. So then this came up much more aggressively. Again, so this is load balancers that you're seeing right now. So that means traffic is reaching origin. So it basically lasted for another about 1.5 hour until mitigations etc. took place. Uh, Same around 6 p.m. we triggered it off. Sites went back to normal. Uh, Although this was very short-lived, so at around again 11 p.m. IST, this again came back up, hitting it with a little less rate, but a lot more distributed now. So this lasted for an extremely long time. So this was almost there till almost 7 o'clock in the morning. So started at about 11 p.m., lasted till almost 7 p.m. So this was like an entire night work of job. Finally managed to mitigate this around 7 o'clock. This stayed down for some time and again started hitting us during business hours, which is around 3:30 p.m. IST. So again about 12:31 p.m. for Turkey with a very, very high rate. Again, this was the highest rate that we've seen in this entire attack. Again, good part is by now we had a lot of mitigations in place. So this basically took that off almost immediately. So we just saw the very short-lived attack for about 30 minutes and then this kicked off. Ever since this has been down, and although our teams are monitoring this, we haven't seen this come back up yet from 6 p.m. last evening to now.
So what are the mitigation plans there, sir? If you can give us an overview, is it like Shield Advanced or something enabled on it?
I'm just going to be walking you through all of that as well. So just wanted to give you background about how things were, what exactly we're looking at. Okay, in terms of traffic, So this is what generic trends look like now. Our generic traffic is looking extremely tiny in front of all this because of all this drama that we're seeing here. So overall in trends, we were seeing almost close to about 70,000 packets per second being pumped in. So what was happening was backend load balancers were being able to take it, but the pods that we were launching on, so eventually we reached max capacity. And then once we reached max capacity in the Turkey region or island region where we are hosted out of, so AWS ran out of nodes to give us, and eventually we hit the peak. And basically, what happened was we were maxed out. So pods started dying off. When they died off, we scaled almost 2x of that. So to run our basic site, which is this site basically, which is in Turkey. So to run this side, we have approximately 170 pods which run. When this died off, we were close to almost 340 pods. After that, Amazon could not give us any more spot instances or any other instances that we required. Then what happened was we tried to correct this, but what was happening, the traffic pump in was so much that by the time new pods were actually coming up, the old ones were dying off and not being able to become stable. So although the site was back up for some people, but it was highly unresponsive at this point in time. So from a mitigation strategy, we applied multiple things. So I'll just show you the extent first. So let me just focus in on this period and show you about how distributed these things were. Folks, just keep this confidential because this is like company data, etc. So, but I'm just showing it to you for a learning cause.
Which is which GUI, sir? Akamai, I saw something.
Yeah, we use Akamai as our DDoS protection and WAF.
Okay.
All right. Initially, the attack was on these two URLs. So they were just consistently hitting us on this URL. This URL is nothing but just a search parry, a term which you basically just type in here. For example, if you type that out, so this is basically that. It then migrated to something called as BMW. Then it went to a specific term ID here. Now, we were trying to understand motivation behind this. Motivation was not scraping, it was just disruption. And eventually and finally, then they went up to slash and they were hitting us on the base path itself. Now, the strangest part of all this was that we had a planned migration on the 5th. So we had anyways scaled down our instances and infrastructure to its bare minimum because we were supposed to migrate at this point in time. We had to cancel that migration because of this, and we had to get everything going back up and running because we were actually churning this out of one account and bringing it to another. So eventually, bad timing was the only thing, or good timing from an attacker's perspective, because we had switched off mitigations, which we generally do before migrations. So that is why you were seeing this traffic getting percolated down to the origin and hitting us actually. So even for us to switch everything back on and come back to original state, it took us a very long time to do that because number one, there were a lot of manual changes people had done on the backend infrastructure. So to associate all of that with code and get it back up and running took a very long time. Now, in terms of mitigation, uh, so Akamai does provide standard bot rules that we have, but factually, some of them worked for some time, some of them didn't work at all. I will just show you what we started off with. So number one, what you can see is a huge dip in the number of detections what Akamai was making at this point in time, right? So if I go back to original traffic, you will see this was the original number of traffic that I received at this point in time. And if I go into the bot console, you will see this becomes almost just about 10 to 12% of the original traffic. So Akamai was classifying that for approximately just about 12% of the traffic, which mitigation was there. So all these things that we see over here was mitigating it, but was only detecting and mitigating about 12% of that. So then we said, all right, if Akamai can't see it and they don't want to, classify it as bot, let's do something. So what we did was we created something called as a custom rule on our firewall. which basically did nothing but, I'll just show it to you. So the first step first was to get full visibility, because although we were seeing Akamai mitigating to a certain extent, we couldn't basically see all attack traffic getting flagged. So what we did was we went and created a custom visibility rule. In this visibility rule, what we basically do is we log every request that is coming to this domain. We log their header order, and we log something called as a TLS hash. Right? What this TLS hash is, I will just tell you in a bit. But the moment we switch this on, you will see all traffic started to get logged over here for this traffic. Right? So if I come here, now for every request, what you will see is we get something called as a TLS hash and a header order. Now what that header order does exactly is, I'll just show it to you. And folks, this is not Akamai specific, so you guys can do this on any WAF as well. Or, I mean, this is not something which Akamai provides out of the box. This is just something that we asked them to create for us, and we did it that way because I find it the best way to mitigate solutions or mitigate things, and I'll explain to you what I mean.
So it was layer 7 attack or a layer 3 or 4 attack?
Yeah, 7.
Okay.
Nothing on layer 3, layer 4. Right. So what you will see over here is that we started logging two things. Number one, if you see under the message over here, I don't know if it's clear, I'll just zoom in. This is a hash that we started logging, right? And I started logging the header order which was coming in. So for example, you will see over here that every request which comes to us comes with a specific order of the headers, right? Now, if somebody is using their browser and is a genuine user, this header order should come up the way that I am setting up the app and the way that the web server is set up the app. So the header order should be in a function or in a say in an order that host should be first, accept should be there, right? If somebody is crafting requests, although this is still easy to mimic, but if somebody is crafting requests, they will not be able to add the same header order in. Secondly, once somebody makes a request, we drop two headers back from Akamai and we set a cookie. So this cookie is something which basically monitors their actions on the site. So this is one cookie we set for the WAF. This is a cookie we set for bot mitigation, right? Now what happens is if somebody makes a request and doesn't give this back to me in the second time as well, then that means that they are forcefully eradicating those cookies, right? So I said, all right, if this is the scenario, let's just put up a match target. Let's see what headers are coming in. And let me just try finding out if that order is getting matched or not. And secondly, what I did was calculate TLS hashes, right? Now, what TLS hashes do are something very simple as a concept. I don't know if you guys know about this or not, but every user, if they send me a request, right? Now, this user can be, say, a browser, can be automation, can be scripts, can be any XYZ, right? I don't care. Now, whenever somebody sends these requests to me, they can change any identifiers that we look at. So we said, okay, what was the problem was they're changing IPs, they're changing user agents, they're changing header orders, they're changing any possible request that we were seeing, right? So there was no specific pattern for me to look at or mitigate on top of that. Now, if people are doing that, the best way to detect something like this is you start calculating something called as an SSL hash. Okay, what is an SSL hash? So whenever your browser in today's date makes a call or a request to any site, over SSL, there is a proto which is used, right? Now, how this is done is your browsers do this seamlessly in the backend, using SSL as a standard practice or standard protocol, right? Where every browser, when they make a request, they specifically craft that SSL request in a way. So whenever you open any site on HTTPS, that SSL request handshake which comes to us, which is the first step or the first trigger which comes to us, has to come in a very specific way. Now, you can change browsers, you can change, say, automation, you can change scripts, but the way that the SSL handshake will happen in a very specific order. You will not be able to change that. Why? Because the base way of how your SSL is getting crafted depends on the kind of tooling that you're using. For example, if I was using even a Meraki botnet, but I had to put some of my code over there. If I'm using Python requests, to generate these requests out, Python request will form my SSL hash in a very specific way, and the user has no control of this. So you cannot change the way that this gets executed. And even if I have a browser and if I'm continuously just hitting it using any kind of automation as well, you cannot change the way, or any attacker cannot change the way the SSL hash or the protocol is set up. So every request that we were receiving on our infrastructure, I started logging this TLS hash. Okay, what a TLS hash looks like is something like, just make this a little smaller for getting results quicker, but so what TLS hashes look like is something like this. Every time somebody accesses my website, how this TLS hash is formed is basically source characteristics, what base protocols you're using to form SSL connections, and these are limited in number. You cannot have infinite number of hashes coming up, right? So for all that traffic that you're seeing, you're just seeing about 239 hashes coming in. Now, when these hashes start coming up, they can change anything that they want. They can change IP addresses, they can change countries, they can change whatever they want, automation, scripts, header orders, user agents, anything that they want to change, they can change, but they cannot change this hash. So once we started logging that hash down, we started analyzing these hashes. So for example, I'll just show you what one hash looks like. Let this load. Yep. So this is traffic for one specific hash that we were seeing, right? Coming in from multiple countries, IPs, hitting us consistently with one path, one request, right? Changing other things, whatever they want to keep changing, they can change it. But come what may, their hash was the same, right? So what we did was picked up these hashes, built up a rule for this hash, and we started mitigating that. So what you would see is we just set up a deny rule for hashes which were malicious. And eventually, if I just remove this off, yep, eventually once this was successfully applied, we basically got this entire attack under control, because no matter what they were trying to change, this they cannot change. So over here, we applied standard mitigation in terms of request anomaly blocks. So if you're crafting from scripts, if you're crafting from various kind of automations, that was getting mitigated. When this came in, we followed a similar practice where we started putting up more of cookie monitoring. So for example, is your cookie coming in? Is it coming in properly or not? When this was happening is when we actually went ahead and said, okay, too many things are changing. We got to consistently keep updating rules. So We started putting TLS hashes here sometime over here, and once we set this up, we've seen a pretty consistent drop. Now, why you see this spike was because we disabled mitigation for some time to enable our migration setup to start. But the moment we disabled it, we saw that spiking up again like crazy. So we enabled it again and I've left it as is.
A CDN network is used.
I'm sorry.
CDN.
Akamai is a CDN, right?
Oh,
Akamai is
it is
CDN.
Akamai. Akamai is used. Okay.
Yeah.
CloudFront is not used.
No, we use Akamai for CDN and WAF and bot mitigation. Any questions anybody has? So problem was that we were fighting a two-front war. This was on one account. We have another
But how
site.
they are able to reach the origin? Means from viewer request only it should have blocked. No, if I translate into the CloudFront terminology, then it
Yes,
should have blocked at viewer's request only. No.
it would have if the number of requests were somehow there. The total number of requests per IP was not even more than two or three. It was
So
extremely distributed. It was just based out of like every IP was not hitting us more than about 10 times an hour. So all type of rate limit policies, viewer requests, etc. also are failing.
because usually the cached item would be accessed from CloudFront only. It will not reach to origin.
Yeah, so this was not cached basically, right? The cached part was still working. That was not problem, but the entire site or the front end is not cached. There are some aspects of it which is cached, not everything is cached. And because of the sheer number of requests, even the backend Redis cache that we have, even that started failing.
So from ALB,
Mhm.
Kubernetes pods. So that is on AWS we are using.
Yeah,
Okay. Target or managed?
managed.
Okay. On EC2 instances.
Yes, we have a managed EKS that we use. So the problem was again that this was a two-front war that we were looking at. One was a Turkey market, one was a Spain market that we were looking at. So happening parallelly in both places.
So can our Kubernetes cluster can deny the DDoS traffic?
So if it was L3, L4, yes, but these are like just genuine requests that you're making. So somebody is just flooding you with this request over and over and over and over and over again. So you really can't do much there. It's like genuine traffic somebody is opening.
So compute, they were targeting compute.
Yeah. The main objective was service disruption, that's all.
Hmm.
Nothing else. It wasn't scraping, it wasn't L3, L4, it wasn't any of our SYN or SYNAC, etc. attacks that we look at. It was just service disruption by flooding the entire application out.
Millions of HTTPS requests.
Yep, that was the idea.
So miss out of the context. So our digital certificates are installed on ALB,
What digital certificates? The SSL certs.
SSL cert, yeah.
So SSL offloading happens in two prongs, especially with Akamai or any CDN that you host, you will have it on two prongs. And if you're using AWS, then you don't need to do it in two ways. But any user which sends us the first request, if this is how traffic is routed, it will first make a request with our Akamai layer. The first layer of SSL offloading happens here itself. So if you open any of these sites and if you look at the certificate, this certificate is basically which is uploaded in Akamai itself. So this is the Akamai cert that we have. So first layer of SSL gets offloaded here. the second layer of SSL, which basically forwards to our AWS, uses the load balancer certificate. So there is a certificate here to encrypt this communication, and there is a certificate here to encrypt this communication. The hashes that we were calculating were here.
Yeah, the public certificate is on Akamai.
Yes.
And load balancer is the private certificate for internal means.
It's a
Again,
public,
we are creating tunnel from Akamai to AWS.
yes, it's a public certificate. There is way to do it private as well if you set up a peering with Akamai, but it's extremely expensive to do that. So this is a public certificate with security groups restricting it to only Akamai IPs.
Correct. And from ALB to EC2 is HTTP only, not
Yeah.
encrypted.
So SSL offloading happens here.
So AWS can see your traffic.
Internally, yes, they can see it.
Yeah, most of the time they don't encrypt it bit inside AWS.
Yep.
Else again, EC2 instance has to do a overhead of decrypting.
It makes sense to do this in different ways. So for example, if you have something very sensitive that you're flowing, so for example, a payment subnet, they're all integrated, they're all encrypted, even internal communications.
Yeah, end to end is required.
Yeah. So anything which is HTTP or serving a website which doesn't have confidential PII data is all on AT. All user login and authorization is again on HTTPS. So what we do is from this we have set up something called as ambassador. I don't know if, so it's another, many of you will be knowing Nginx, right? So ambassador is just something like Nginx as well. So all my requests basically get forwarded to ambassador. And this is something which I use for authentication and whitelisting. So for
identity provider type.
yes, somewhat, somewhat. I won't say exactly, but yes. So what generally happens here is that every request, so we have multiple layers of ambassador. So for example, this is say an HTTPS only cluster. This is say an HTTP only cluster. So once SSL offloading happens from here, we send it to the HTTP cluster. This basically looks at the request path to say, okay, if it's slash whatever X, for example, send it to say service whatever xxx, right? So this basically does this. Additionally, if we have inter-service communication, this also acts as a authentication kind of platform where every service cannot hit any other service as well until and unless it has an authentication token generated from ambassador and it's whitelisted. For HTTPS communication, we have a different load balancer just like this, which basically forwards this down to this this ambassador layer. And over here, we have our internal certificate deployed, and all the communication for this, which it forwards it to any service, is all on HTTPS. So if this is service YYY, this is all on HTTPS. So whatever we need to keep encrypted, we keep encrypted. Whatever we don't need to keep encrypted, we don't. But this is just a replica here.
So this ambassador, does this act as a proxy server?
Yeah, somewhat. It's basically an authentication, come path-based routing, come inter-service communication routing kind of thing. So what this basically, why we do this is because I have centralized logging here. So I don't log at every instance, right? It's a waste because generally what happens in pods, etc., you can have evict policies and all that, but when people generally try to target pods and all that, they kick off its logging very easily. So anything that is happening, we basically log here. So Ambassador basically logs for us for all traffic coming in. Ambassador logs here. Obviously, the APMs, etc., is something which the pods are sending. But if terms of application side logging and all, that is all here. So tomorrow I can have 10 different kind of services coming up here I don't care. I don't need to change the logging pattern because it needs to be set up on Ambassador for that. And anytime something is set up on Ambassador, the logs will get generated and get sent. Plus, I don't need to worry about formatting, etc. Different kind of application formats, different kind of log formats. Everything basically remains consistent.
And do you use identity federation for users?
Yes, we do. We use Okta.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any questions further?
Do you patch your Kubernetes system means
Yep.
regularly?
We have to do it every 6 months. Yeah, Amazon keeps kicking it one version of every 6 months.
Okay. So any service disruptions or it is smooth?
We've built a tool for that. It's basically called Dockyard, which basically does EKS upgrades and patching for us. So it will be open source very soon.
Dockyard.
Yeah. The name will basically come up on GitHub very soon under the OLX repo. I'll share it with all of you once it is. So it's basically there for patching plus EKS upgrades. So for example, Amazon says that I want to terminate 1.23 and I'm launching 1.24. And then you need to cycle all your nodes and all for that. So then basically you can just use that solution there.
Okay. So you are using container registry as well. All images are in Docker.
Yes.
Okay.
We use an internal registry now because of the stupid rate limiting thing that Docker has put up.
Nice. So many, complicated architectural and people are doing DDoS. Mhm.
Yep, it is nice. I mean, it took us quite some time on this instance to basically knock this off because here was it when it actually started becoming extremely distributed. If I just show it to you again, let me just.
And the architectural is scalable. So that is
Yes,
also a problem.
scaled to a max level. I mean, see, obviously auto scaling was there. We kept scaling up. So all those sites were being able to handle it. It's not like we can't, but at the end of the day, we knew that we would run out of nodes somewhere. So Amazon ran out of nodes in that region, right? So eventually we had to take a hit for it.
You will also charged more for this much of tenure.
Yeah, that's there. So in terms of country, it was extremely distributed. In terms of IP addresses, there were infinite number of them. I don't know how many we were looking at. Uh, So during this time, it really took us some time to basically mitigate it because whatever mitigation strategies we were following were not. So if I zoom in on this period, you will continuously see that these things keep going down. So every time you see a dip is a new mitigation strategy which was applied.
Mm.
So there were multiple things that were tried out but didn't work. Then we finally went up to say, okay, let's just put TLS hashing. Although TLS hashing is good to do, the only drawback of it is that it adds almost about a second of latency.
Yeah, more computational power.
Yeah, so it's not sustainable. So yes, you can do it for a period of some time to leverage this, but if you ask me if can we keep it on, no, it's not recommended. It adds a lot of latency.
And decision making for attack is there. Must be L1 or L2.
So L1s were raising it. So once we figured this out, was so I'll tell you what the actual problem was also at night was there was a migration ongoing. So people really thought that they had kicked off the application because of some reason, because there were at least 30-40 things changing at that point of time. So just think that you're getting ready for a migration, you make a change, right? And your site goes down. Now, the first suspect that comes over there is that I made a change. I've deployed something to production and that is causing it.
True.
right? So even my response over there is, has there been any change? Yeah, they said, yes, we just made a release. I said, okay, roll it back. They rolled that release back. The site started working because all our pods got cycled. So after
Okay.
that, people were more under the impression that, it is application side issues until we started finally figuring out that it is continuously that pods are dying off, and we are continuously getting alerts from the site that traffic is increased 10x. And why we didn't actually react on traffic increasing was because we were hitting a public route to basically access or do data migration. So we were expecting a high throughput anyways at that point of time. And because we were expecting high throughputs, we had disabled the alarms for that. And because those alarms were disabled, none of us actually got any kind of alerts that there was unusual amount of traffic coming in. So when we started saying, okay, pods are dying again and again, it can't be release related, that's when we actually started looking at traffic, and then we looked at it and we said, all right, okay, this is something else. So it's just timing matters, and that is all I can say. It just happened at a really bad time and happened at a time when most of our alerting, etc., was switched off. So our pager duty cycles were switched off, our logging was switched off. We were in maintenance mode for almost 2 hours before that. So yeah,
But how come, means, is it a coincidence or the hacker knows
that's,
when the
that
site
is
will
something
go?
we're trying to figure out. That is something we're trying to figure out because the timing is very, very peculiar.
Doesn't seem a coincidence.
It doesn't, indeed, it doesn't. So we're just trying to look at it.
Okay.
That is something we are now looking at. But yeah, it is rather strange. So that's what I asked some people. Have you pissed off any vendor? Have you said no to anybody? Because we're shutting down one market from one place and bringing it to another. So that means we will be terminating vendors as well. So can be anything. I don't know. Has can be somebody pissed somebody off. Somebody's just launching it. I've also asked Akamai whether they faced a similar kind of attack on any of their other customers, to which I haven't received a response. But for the botnet ID, I believe almost 70 to 72% of Akamai customers were targeted with that. So I do believe it's a little more large scale than what we are probably talking about, and it will probably come up. I don't think we were the only ones who were targeted.
Hmm, correct. Akamai was the target.
Can be, never know.
Nice job, by the way.
It's still not over. I'm not going to say that.
Your weekend was exciting.
Yep, this has been happening for the last 2 days, so that's why, yeah, just little lacking on sleep, but otherwise it's fine. But this is what we live for.
But somebody will get shouting, your SIM team, alerting team.
Yeah, so yeah, we have an in-house SOC, so I don't have a managed service. Plus, the thing is that there is a lot of automation which is kicking in, so it takes care of it. But just we've been cycling shifts between our team just to keep an eye on it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. I would just want to cover a few topics before we dive into the labs, right? There are just some things which I wanted to explain to you of how we are doing it. Uh, these things can be different in every organization, but follow similar kind of concepts and similar kind of topics. So I will just whiteboard right now. Post that, we will then get into practicals for KMS, SSO, backup, and third-party access. So those are the four things I want to target on AWS, what we'll do. But before that, I just want to cover a few things like the privacy policies, etc. How do you deploy it and what we're doing there. So this is experience and just governing out of what we are doing and what I've generally seen. Again, these things can be different for everybody. I'm not saying they have to be like this, but these are just generic best practices that we follow, basis of a lot of recommendations coming in from a lot of places. So the first thing that I want to start with is shift left. And although I'm not a big fan, and it's something that a lot of security folks are talking about right now. So yes, we also jumped on the bandwagon for it. There are some things that we have to look at shift left, and specifically people start with shift left by saying that, okay, I have something called as a CI/CD, right? And the concept here of what they basically say is try implementing security as near to development as possible. Okay, so conceptually, although like theoretically, people, I mean, it sounds very good. There are a lot of things to do. I will just throw out the other phases as well. But in generic cycles way, they say that, okay, let's start security at developer. Let's start capturing things much more sooner than what we can. In traditional orgs, or what we were seeing originally was that everything used to be ready, used to come up for something called as a penetration test that we used to run. Now, these could be, some people do run them in a pre-prod manner. Some people run them in a production way. And generally every release that was basically coming out, or every change that was coming out, was going through either one of these things. These used to relate to vulnerabilities coming up. So both sides, we were getting vulnerabilities. We were opening tickets for them. This was going back to developers. Now, this is simple and effective to do if you're looking at just a minor change. But what if there is something more, which is something like an architectural issue, right? Now, if there's an architectural issue, that means that we need to go back to the drawing board. That means go back to design phase. That means go back and change things around, and then get back into the entire application lifecycle that we look at. So what exactly happens is that in in theory, they say time to fix is minimum as soon as we catch it. Then when we start progressing down in the application lifecycle. So to fix an issue, for example, if it was production, which is my final state, which I say is there, right? And if I detect an issue here, even to fix this issue, the time taken and the effort taken is maximum. Vis-a-vis, if you detect some issue here itself, the time and effort are both the least. Now, why is that? If I detect that I've put in some kind of security issue or even an application issue, if I'm in dev phase, I can fix it right there and then, even before I release to say pre-prod, or even before I release to staging, right? Vis-a-vis, something is in production, I will need to check 10 things out. What is breaking? What is the impact? How is it, going to change my application around? Can I even do it in the first place or not? Yeah. So basically what we start doing here is that for every change cycle that we do, right? If something is in development, then let's say something goes up in QA, or what we call nowadays as test cases automation. And if we are running test cases after this, still time to fix here increases, because whatever you have done from this phase to this phase you need to basically look at changes here, you need to look at issues here, and then you need to cycle this back to developers. The developer basically fixes issues here and then releases it. Going forward goes back to QA. So imagine for one issue which the test case automation or the QA picked up has to basically go back to 2 cycles of this, and we increase our turnaround time there, right? Similarly, if this goes to say pre-production or whatever staging environments that you call it, or UAT environments that you call it, right? So if this comes here and issues are detected here, you see time linearly increasing as well. Vis-a-vis, if this goes to production, we see that the time to fix this basically increases exponentially, right? And we do see that eventually, even with security issues, I'm sure all of you have dealt with getting it fixed by dev teams, etc. Takes a very long time, specifically if we start going down further and further right. So conceptually came up that okay, let's start detecting security issues or application side issues or quality issues as left as possible in order to save time, in order to get out quick releases, in order to help reduce something called as technical debt. Right now, technical debt comes out when your processes itself is not stable enough and you are detecting everything in production. Are all of you familiar with tech debt? Yes, sir. All right. So idea here is if everything starts coming up in production, you are basically adding or making simple fixes to solve those problems, which in a sense, tomorrow, if I need to integrate a new feature because I made that quick hack or quick fix or a bad implementation, it basically requires a lot more re-engineering. And because that requires a lot more re-engineering for every new feature that you launch, your engineering efforts basically increase. Now, when your engineering efforts keep increasing, we just call this as tech debt, and your tech debt basically keeps going higher and higher. Eventually, you will realize that your time to market or your time to release basically becomes extremely high. So in order to reduce that, we said that all right, not so this is not only a security concept. It basically said, okay, for quality and security both, we will start looking at moving things as far left as possible and detecting it as early as possible so that we can start reducing tech debt, so that we can start formally, formalizing a structure around release cycles where we are focusing on quality and security both, since those are the kind of things which come up once we're in production. You will either get a quality issue or you will get a security issue. Okay. In order to do all of this, what was recommended or what is generally followed everywhere starts with something called as design reviews. Now, whenever any new service or implementation comes up, ideally, recommendation is that security and quality both should be part of those design reviews. In design reviews, what you need to effectively do is do something called as an architecture review, do something called as a privacy review, do an application security review, and do a data compliance review. Right? This is something which is specific to security. And why I say that is I want to start looking at the architecture, whether if I'm integrating with any different service or if I'm looking at any different kind of data sources or I'm looking at integrating with any third parties. Next thing I want to look at is if I am operating any kind of design or if I'm operating any kind of service, is it going to violate any of my privacy aspects at all or not? Right? It gets fairly important to do this. Focus currently is not there on this, but as you keep moving more and more into global markets, you will require privacy reviews to happen, because although this is not very big in India, it is extremely important to do this externally. Third part is standard things where we look at application security, how are IAM working out, how is data security happening, how is data sources being connected, are we following minimum or least privilege access, or are we following minimum kind of access in terms of data stores, etc. that we require. So all the standard stuff that I think all of us have been doing for a very long time, right? And then comes up to the data compliance. Now, privacy and data compliance are separate. So what we mean by data compliance is that you mark data to be CIA compliant. So you know what is confidential, you know who needs to access it. You also add a certain tag to it to say, okay, if this data is under a specific compliance level or not. Now, when there's data lying in, say, specifically cloud or databases or S3 buckets, etc., the if we do not tag data, whether this data is confidential, restricted, it's internal only, it's external only, right? You will never figure out what kind of data has to reside where, and how do I make sense of that data. Tomorrow, if you're having architecture reviews and if you're having compliance reviews, you will require data compliance and privacy reviews to happen, because essentially you need to know what's lying where. And the biggest problem today when I talk to people is that they have everything bundled out in one place. And when they have everything bundled out in that single place, when I ask them, where is your data lying? Are you sure that, access levels are restricted, or you are only sharing data with this specific region or resource? That is where questions or faults start happening. And when you're operating in multiple markets from, say, a common architecture, it starts becoming extremely complicated to look at. So under design reviews, we need to make sure that we're testing these four things out. We are also testing out from data compliance that my policies in terms of data restoration or in data safekeeping is there. For example, some markets require to store data for a year, some require to store them for 5 years, some require them to store them for 7 years. How do you define that? So these kind of things, they need to be analyzed, they need to be checked, and they need to be properly tagged. Any questions on this part? Okay, I assume that's a no. Next step cycles is that we get into the dev phase. So once your designs are approved and everything is done, the next thing is your services start getting made or integration start happening, right? Now there are 2 or 3 ways of looking at this. Some people get their IDs integrated with stuff like checkmarks, or there are multiple other solutions for ID kind of things, right? Or some people say that, all right, you release in CI/CD over here. So for example, they will push their change to your CI/CD. And in this, I will add, say, secret detection, AppSec scans, container scans, say third-party integration scans, library checks, whatever, right? Some people believe that this is a better way, and we can reduce these things one step further by applying ID checks itself. That means you integrate your solutions with the ID, and while the dev is coding, they basically start getting those alerts. There are some people who believe this is too intrusive, and they basically do it at the CI/CD layer, where you start doing multiple kind of detections in terms of container security, in terms of secret detection and application dash SaaS kind of scans that you're running. Okay. Now, once this qualifies, the idea here is that your CI/CD or the integrations that you make itself will start launching this backwards to the dev at this point of time. Whatever is there, they cycle it, they fix it, and they release it to CI/CD again. So this basically becomes your integration cycle here, right? Post this, you deploy to either staging or pre-prod, whatever you want to call it, and from this you deploy to prod. Any questions here?
Uh, Here, in CI/CD, CD is continuous delivery or continuous deployment.
Continuous delivery.
So some manual intervention is there to deploy.
Yes. Now it depends on system per system. Some people have active QAs where they basically just depend on this. So for example, what I will do over here is I will say if there is no critical issues, uh, there are no high issues. If there are say 10 medium which are flagged and there are say 5 low which is flagged, in this scenario, if there are no critical or high issues, I will allow deployment to go to staging, right? And on staging, I will say that I will still want to run a dash scan here. And if those dash scans also deploy and say that, okay, there is no critical high, then I will allow this to basically go to prod. So then there are some checks that you can keep putting in. But idea is once somebody pushes this here and depending on the thresholding that you want to do in terms of security, quality is something which I'm not talking about, but I'm just saying in terms of security here. If you have any kind of threshold over here from your solutions, you can say what you want to pass and what you want to send back. For example, if I knew that there was a critical vulnerability which came up here, I would just stop this itself and pass it back to the dev. But if
it is scalable?
It's absolutely scalable.
Okay. I heard continuous deployment is good than delivery.
Uh, there are caveats of this. See, I'm not a big fan of this anyway. I'm telling you that very honestly because it sounds very good on paper. There is a big gap in terms of implementation cycles here, and problem is that you have so much tooling which keeps coming up. How do you do it efficiently? Something which I always believe in that you need to empower developers. You can't tell them that I'm going to keep building up brick walls every time I'm going to put something new. So ideally, there is a recommendation cycle that we follow, but doing it this way, this is generally what shift left talks about. And if you want to do it, you can do it, but I'm not a big fan of it anyways. I just believe that there are some things which need to be done in a better way. And since we are looking at all of this, I don't think it's effectively helped out security of code even after following these things. So I'll give you an example. We set up this kind of thing where we had everything in pipelines, everything set up there, had issues getting detected, getting flagged back to dev. We still saw a lot of issues getting percolated to staging and prod. So then basically the question comes up to how effective are your systems detecting them here? So although the effectiveness is pretty okay, I would not say that it's extremely high. I'll say it's pretty okay. But the problem is devs are smart enough to know to bypass these things. So they were trying to fix for specific issues. So for example, if there was an issue which was raised here, they were trying to hack these issues, then rather fixing what was there. And when you start hacking these issues and putting in just things like, for example, if there's a clear text password, you just encode it and keep it, and then my check passes it. But the problem is that you haven't moved it to a KMS solution. right? So when you start doing
So
those,
then it is passed or it is again sent to
so
developer.
I don't follow this method at all. I'm just talking about shift left. I will tell you what I follow. I don't follow this method at all. Yes, some parts of it we look at, but the entire CI/CD happening there and putting everything in CI/CD and blindly trusting is something I don't do.
Correct. And what toolings are used in each stage? Current market trend.
Design reviews mostly are manual, and I love to do this manually. So, in design reviews, I make sure that whatever APIs or solutions or anything is going out, somebody from security is involved, somebody from privacy is involved, somebody from legal is involved, right? So, this step, now you can ask me, how do I make sure of that? We have an SDLC process where in Jira, we have set up an automation where every step, for example, if you have a new process that you want to deploy, you will chart it out as an RFC, you will send it out, product will basically approve it. Then when it comes to tech, the leaders themselves will start their architecture build up. Once the architecture build up happens and their architecture is ready for them to push it even to development, right, as an initiative. So every dev requires an initiative to come up for them to start coding that. And this is basically written in our GitLab and our Jira processes as well. That cannot be passed up as an initiative until and unless it goes through an architecture review from security, it goes through a review from privacy, it goes through a review from legal. So all three need to sign off on that. Once they sign off, only then that new initiative gets created. Once a new initiative gets created, then only can the dev actually start spawning a GitLab project for that in the first place. Otherwise, they can't even do that. And that is just one check. There are multiple other checks also. You can say that, okay, what if they do it in their own repo or something like that? There are multiple checks for that, that any initiative that is launched there will not be able to actually move on to production also or pre-prod also if it is not past design reviews. So I spend maximum amount of time here because I believe if you do these things effectively, you can essentially reduce a lot of your overhead and overload that you basically look at downstream the layers. Developers, I don't believe in putting IDs, so let them work freely. It's very, very intrusive. IDs keep changing. Either you are so strict that you say that, okay, this is the only ID you're going to use and this is the only version you're going to use. If you believe in free development for developers, I don't think it's a good way to go about it. Uh, for CI/CD, we use multiple different kind of solutioning. Majorly, we use for container scans, we are using Anchor. For application security, DAST, we're using Probly, which is nothing but Burp Suite Enterprise. For SAST, we are using SonarCube. For secret detection, we are using Detect Secrets in Trivi. For third-party scans and dependencies, again, we're using Trivi and we're using SonarCube.
Okay.
Right, for staging pre-prod, the dash that we're running, we run Probably Plus again. For production, we have third-party pen testing vendors who basically keep picking up every application every quarter.
In design reviews, do we do thread modeling, stride
Yes,
and all?
yes. So generally following the same concepts, but I don't believe in enforcing this and putting it down to, uh, saying that this is what you need to do. Rather, these things exist, but I do not take ownership of them. And how I do that is every developer or every engineering manager who has, say, 10 services under them, my only job is to give them insights to say that, hey, your code and your services and your repos have these issues, right? You are the owner from a security perspective, you are the owner from a privacy perspective. My job is just to enable you. right? I'm a field expert in security. You do not have that expertise, so I will give that to you. I will enable you to tell you that these are the things that exist in your repository. These are compliance violations that you're doing. These are security violations that you're doing. Give them the insights, give them the data, give them the feedback. At the end of the day, it is their job to fix it. Now, how do we say that? Okay, somebody might just say, okay, I don't care about security at all, and I will still keep rolling out. These metrics are basically tracked at a business level, are tracked at a technical level, and are tracked for KR's personal goals, personal level insights. So if you do not focus in these areas, and for example, at the end of the year, if you had say 20% vulnerabilities in your repositories and that increases to 25 or 30, it is going to directly impact you as an engineering person also in a company. So I believe security is evolving into more of an enabler role. Uh, I, I think next 4 or 5 years down the line, we are going to stop looking at IAM and saying that okay, you don't have access, you can't own it, because see, developers have evolved. They are no longer just going to be sitting and coding. They want infrastructure access. They want to deploy their own infra. They want to own that infrastructure, right? So why not build up enough guardrails across that, enable them to do that, and trust them to basically say that okay, this is your infrastructure, you're going to own it. My only thing is if there is something which comes up, I'm going to flag it to you. For example, somebody has an S3 bucket, it gets publicly opened. All I'm going to do is if that is not approved or doesn't have the right tags on it or doesn't have the right process on it, I will knock that off from production and I will say okay, I'll make it private again. In case you want it public, go ahead from the process. There's a process to set up, review it, let somebody from security check it out. They will add the tag and an expiration date on it. Once that is done, you run the process, you have it. But we cannot start interfering in day-to-day lives by saying, all right, I will control infrastructure, I will control security, and I will start doing everything there. Once development finishes, your job is done. That used to work. It's not going to keep working because the life cycle of developers is changing. Few years back,
But
devs didn't know.
something is, sorry to interrupt, but
Go ahead,
something
go ahead.
is changed in prod, then cost of rework would get increased, no?
Absolutely. See, but if you are increasing, if you're increasing technical debt, you are increasing it for your group, right? If you have business metrics, for example, what are my, or let me say, what are my 5 or 10 top things that I want to do, right? Or what are my personal goals that I need to take care of? I need to reduce my tech debt, right? I need to just make sure that whatever I am trying to release in production has least issues. I will not say that I will not stop you. I mean, there are some boundaries where I say, okay, if there's something critical, you cannot go ahead, right? But for example, in today's date, I have 10 medium and 5 low, right? What are we going to do about these 15 issues? What generally happens is you open tickets and security teams are consistently following up, guys, SLAs are there, please fix, SLAs are there, please fix, right? Why should I be doing that?
Also extensions.
So see, the problem is I don't care. My only job is I'm going to raise it to you, right? I'm going to set up my tooling in a specific way that yes, if there is something critical, I will deny you from going ahead. But if there is something medium low, I will give you visibility of that. You can go to a dashboard, you can go see your services, what all issues exist. There is a security rating that we follow where we give them an ABCDF. There is a compliance rating that we follow. There's a privacy rating that we follow. If that rating falls below A, it gets flagged, right? It basically put up against that person. And honestly, I believe in naming and shaming here at all. You follow SLAs which have been defined with everybody. If there is no valid reason for you to breach that SLA, you're going to get named and shamed. And it works very well. I mean, very frankly, I have not had to follow up for a security issue or track SLAs or track everything. People pick it up, they fix it themselves. yes, there are times when somebody is busy with something or the other and SLAs do get breached, and we understand that. Yeah? It's not like we're going to be, hacking you for it. But at least a consistent follow up and then saying, okay, this is changed, but then a response comes in, okay, but we are deprecating the service in 1 month, so there's no active deployment or development happening on it. Sorry, I mean, that's not my problem. So instead of becoming blockers and saying that we own security, start giving ownership to people to start owning security. Start becoming more of enablers by saying that, okay, I'm going to give you the visibility, I'm going to give you the metrics, I'm going to give you the tracking. At the end of the day, responsibility is not on a security team to say that, okay, we will not have 10 issues when you are not developing that product. How can you control that you will have less number of issues that you're going to get? When you are not fixing that code, how can you promise that, okay, I will reduce critical vulnerabilities in this quarter by say 10%? Yes, an issue can be that, okay, for you that detection is lacking, you're going to increase detection capabilities. That is something that you're going to do. But ownership needs to remain with engineering folks. Security cannot have ownership of issues which you are not coding, you are not developing, you're not designing, you're not fixing. So I strongly believe give the ownership to engineering folks, give it to them to you. Keep putting in your tooling. If you want secret detection to happen, set up secret detection, put it in the CI/CD, get outputs, start sending that visibility to your engineering folks. Let the engineering folks take ownership of that. Ask your company executives to change that process around by saying that, okay, we're going to have SLAs and people are not going to keep following up. You have to own this. Give them the ownership, let them take it. Everybody's happy in this, trust me. I've got very positive feedback from a lot of people here that number one, they have complete visibility, and number two is that we don't need to consistently keep following up. Any questions? All right. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is around like bug bounty platforms. So, how many of you have public bug bounties open for your companies or the other?
I have not participated in it.
You don't. I'm saying you don't participate, but does your company have a public bug bounty platform somewhere or a program?
No, I am in a
No,
service
I don't.
company, so
Come on.
no.
This is why I don't like Indian companies here. Anyways, all right. So idea here is that do remember that if you don't have a program, also you will still receive issues coming up from hackers today. People, especially in the younger age group, are very motivated nowadays, right? Cybersecurity as a career is coming up, and ethical hacking is started to take place, and it's going to just keep increasing. So ideally, uh, even if you don't want to pay for a program or something, and you don't want it to be public because you think that once you're going to get a program, you're going to receive so many issues, and then you have so too many payouts to give up. So there are ways that we can start bug bounty platforms and programs. So the first way that you can do it is start internally. So go to platforms like HackerOne or Bugcrowd or whatever, right? Tell them you want an internal only program where you list your scope, you list everything there, and you open this out to your employees. So this is specifically because people are saying you guys don't have programs, so I'll just increment it layer by layer, right? Give payouts in terms of whatever goodies and all that, whatever you want to give internally, right? To internal employees, you will fix almost close to about 40 to 50% of your security issues here. Believe me or not, this will help you out the maximum because people know your code, people know where they have to look, even though they are not security researchers, even though they are not, people who are very close or closely associated to it, they will find out the basic shit for you for sure. Right? I agree, advanced kind of attacks or mitigation kind of attacks where we have multi-layered, multi-step kind of attacks, they will not be able to figure out. But to a great extent, your basic issues will get flagged here. Once you do this and you have enough confidence that you run it once or twice in your companies itself, launch a private program with any of them as well. It's up to you. You can also manage your own bug bounty platform. You don't need to be or giving it to somebody else. If you have the manpower and bandwidth to do it, you can just launch a website on it and collect information from them, and then whatever information you're receiving, you review it. We will talk about all of that as well. But launch a private invite only kind of platform, right? And if you have an invite only platform and if you don't go to any of these say hackathons or bugcrowd, etc., you can then basically send out invites to known researchers around the world that you know are good and let them start testing your sites, right? You will find close to about 60% of your issues fixed here, because these are going to be people who are good. These are people who honor security, ethics, etc. as well. So they will not basically go public with whatever issues that you have, right? Keep your payouts maximum on this phase. Just because it's internal, do not, or just because it's invite only, do not skim out over here. Essentially, this is the place you will get the maximum insights into and you will get the maximum benefit coming out. But do not invite hackers, etc., who are not established in the market here. You might have to give a little more payout here, but the core or crux of the issues will get solved here itself. Once you have enough confidence that your entire program has been successful, you have closed issues here, post that, open out a public bug bounty platform where you say either you can do it yourself again by a form, or you go to any of these solutionings that we have like HackerOne, BugProud and all that, and they basically do a first level of at least verification for you. So once you go public, you now have your standard payouts that you define on issues, but you can be rest assured that because the best of the best have been tested out in your private channel and you have gone through an internal thing. So focus here is to remove business flaws, right? And this part will be best tackled in this process because people know your business, people know how they built it up. So they will also know how to fix it and how to misuse it as well, right? Over here, your main target is to find out any critical issues which you have missed, which are going to require high payouts, but you don't want to give it out to the world. So you try to fix out your critical issues in this side. And here, just expect that your standard P2, P3 things will keep coming out. Right? Here you can have your whatever industry payouts that we have, the standard things or whatever your budget allows you to do. But here you will keep receiving these things coming up. You get them fixed if they're valid, you can leave it if they're not. But this is the point where you need to basically just keep it open, keep it running, but don't run private programs just once and leave it. Any migrations you make, any major changes you make, any architectural changes you make, launch another private invite only program and get it to get tested out by people before you add that scope in a public program. Once you run this once, and if you were good with your payouts, etc. as well, these people will be more than happy to come and test your websites out again and again. Thereby, you will also start building up an internal community of your own kind of developer or hackers that you call, right? And these people will generally tell you when there is something publicly wrong also in your site, and they will come and contact you and they will tell you that this is an issue that what is I've found. You can reward them for that, or after some time it's also just about saying that they have a relationship with you, so they will tell you. That's why your public program itself, you will keep receiving minimal kind of things, but it will not be significant. So if you're worried that okay, I go public today and there are going to be a lot of things which are going to come out, if you go stepwise, you can be sure enough that it won't be that bad. The next thing to look at is communication and response times. So if you think you are going to launch this and suddenly you do not have time to look at responses or look at issues which people are sending out, please shut your program before that, because this carries a big weight in terms of brand image and how responsible you are towards security. So if you have an SLA of say 3 days that you set up, and you are running a program to tell people that okay, I'm going to be responding to you in 3 days. Once you submit an issue, do it. Do not miss out on those things. Over communicate to people. Do not leave them hanging and drying for 10, 15 days, 20 days, 30 days without a response. Keep a consistent follow-up, keep a consistent loop open with the attacker there, and keep them informed about whatever you're doing, what is happening, whether there are any changes, if things are getting delayed. Just keep them don't let them ask you for updates, right? Ideally, you should be sending out updates. We should be fixing things. Once those things are fixed, we should be sending them out back to the developers or to the attackers that are there, and that will basically stop them from going rogue. The only thing which I see in very poorly designed bug bounty platforms is communication. People generally do not respond or acknowledge an issue, number one, and number two, they take extremely long, or they might have fixed the issue and then they don't respond back to the attacker for almost 20-30 days. Any questions here?
Bug bounty, I'm not that much familiar, so no questions.
That's fine. I mean, if ever you need to launch programs out, I'm sure you will probably need to do it in a stepwise way. So I'll give you some insights. At OLX, we started here approximately 2 years back. Uh, we found almost close to about 50 to 55 issues, and that is when I joined. Basically, we found about 55 issues here, which were majorly business flaws, right? Which people knew what they were doing. We gave out goodies left, right, and center to them. Uh, Good thing is management etc. was on board, and this was extremely fruitful for us. Once we had these issues fixed, we went to Bugcrowd for a private program. We invited a very specific list of attackers from approximately, I think, about 36 people were there. We got close to about, I think, 15 critical issues here, which we did make payouts for. Uh, After that, we have received almost 6 to 7 of those issues or critical issues which have gone out pro bono from these people. They keep helping us out and they have a very good rapport with us now. Uh, about 1.5 years. So this entire process lasted for approximately about 8 months. After 8 months, we went public with our platform again on Bugcrowd. So we are getting about say close to about 3 to 4 issues a month, which are generic P3, P4, P2 kind of things, nothing severe. and we repeat this exercise every 6 months or at least twice a year. So why we do this is because it helps us to basically re-engage with people who have tested our sites out, and it also helps us to just keep a check in terms of if there's anything that's going wrong. And this is apart from the third party testing that we keep doing. And if you have this process, and if you have third party vendors who are testing your sites, you can make this into a maker checker process where if your third party vendors are they testing your sites properly, why are they missing issues, like what other external people are finding, right? So those kind of things you can always check with them. You can always say that, okay, you scanned a site just a month back and this issue has been found out, why didn't you detect it, please improve your detection cycles and all that. And it's a win-win for everybody basically.
Like previously where I worked, they only had the private one, and there is a proper team for that. It's not like invite. So there
Yeah,
is a proper team. They have they were doing it. And currently, it's a third party one. I've not seen any public part, but yeah, it's a third party currently.
yep, mostly people keep it private and keep it limited because they're scared if they go public they'll get a lot of things, but
Yeah,
ideally.
with third party and all, they sign all this NDA, and also they are pretty much okay with that rather than going to public. And if they have bandwidth and manpower and money, they go for a particular team for that who
Agreed,
handles.
agreed. So yeah, but I'm just saying eventually if you open out this thing to public, see, the only advantage of opening it out to public is that a lot of noise that you will get from people who go on say social media and start going berserk about finding something, you can get those people to come to you instead of going there. I mean, believe me, people generally want to earn quick bucks. So what they want to do is they want to find something. The first thing they will search is that if you have a security program, and if you do have it, they will come and list it there. So a lot of that noise goes down very, very extensively if you look at launching a public platform. So there are, you know, advantages, disadvantages to everything, but I just find it's a little beneficial that you have a proper reporting channel. Any questions?
No, no on the block.
Perfect. All right, folks, just take a 10-minute break. We'll come back and we'll discuss a couple of more things before we jump into the AWS account again.
Okay. 11:45.
Yeah, we'll start at 11:45. Hi folks, are we back? Let me know once you're back, then I'll start.
Yeah, but
All right, okay. Just two more things I want to whiteboard with. We can wrap this up pretty quickly. Is around consent management. So these are more privacy aspects and compliance kind of reasons that we need to collect the right consent. And why I'm covering this in security and rather which is a compliance topic is because these things repeatedly are becoming interchangeable now, right? Consent management has come up as a topic for the least, I think, about 2 or 3 years now. Recently, majorly came up after GDPR compliance came in. So, what is it? Why do we need it? Is basically because of multiple compliances. If you're operating in multiple regions and zones and countries and all of that, we need to figure out number one, which markets we operate out of and what kind of compliances do they require. And most of the markets that we operate out of require consent management. And what consent management is all about is a small checkbox that you have available, which hardly of us ever read, is that people can collect the data or they can contact you or they can have authority over an action that you're taking on any of their site. Usually you will see this for three things. Number one is around notifications. Number two is around creation of accounts. And now the biggest one is around cookies, right? And what cookies essentially translate into is data tracking, retargeting, and modeling, right? Now, what these things basically do is on our sites, whenever we do have functionalities where we do send notifications to people, do remember that even if you're not operating out of multiple markets and only operating out of India, there was a privacy bill which was recently introduced in 2019, uh, but didn't get tabled. It got withdrawn, I think, just last week. And a new dedicated bill is going to start coming out in India as well for data privacy sector as well and consent management. Now, what this states is that if you do have any kind of communication that you want to establish with your customer, you need to provide two things basically. Number one is you need to have consent for contacting them. And number two is that consent cannot be
not audible, Dhruv.
yeah, can you, hello?
Sorry. Yeah, now your voice.
Right. Okay, and the third thing that we talk about is that consent needs to be recorded and stored. Okay, there is another thing which is there. I will just change this order is, or I will just take that in a different thing, but yeah. So in terms of these four things, the first thing that we look at is, in case you want to establish any kind of consent management platform,
So your voice is breaking up. Voice is breaking actually. Bro.
Mic totally gone.
I don't know why this keeps happening.
DDoS.
Does this happen? No, do a lot of people use Teams like daily as well, and this happens to you? Because I've honestly never faced this with Zoom, etc. And whenever I am on Teams, it keeps happening. I don't know. Maybe my
On
laptop doesn't like it.
for
Okay.
Team Siddharth can comment. Mine is
Why?
WebEx.
Yeah, my office streams. Yeah, I had a huge Zoom also. Zoom is nice. Yeah, actually, it's true.
WebEx is good. WebEx is good.
Apex is now ancient.
Yeah. All right. So first thing is, even for default communication, we need to establish consent, right? We cannot send them any kind of communication without having this consent. And now I will tell you why these things become a security problem is because we are required to store this consent, right? When we are storing this consent, it basically involves PII information again that we need to capture and store. There are two ways of doing this. Either you build up a consent management platform, or you basically outsource this and you use a third party for this. And some solutions like this is basically OneTrust, right? Now, either if you're building this consent management platform and you're saying that, okay, I will give that cookie banner which comes up and I will collect that consent and I will record it and I will store it and I will process it, it becomes a security problem, right? If you're using a third-party solution like OneTrust, etc., which is storing this data for you, then access management to that platform becomes a security problem. So why this has started coming up in our purview is because of the nature of data that we are storing and the kind of information that we can get from this data. In a sense, when we look at consent management platforms, it basically contains details of, number one, your browser or device, number two, about the individual themselves, number three, we can also be capturing multiple cookies by defining them of what our requirement is, right? So if we are using some cookies which are basically leading to tracking, etc., and we have our own platform for tracking, we're not using the generic Google ones, etc., is there, in that case we need to define what we are tracking them for. So even for security cookies that we generally inject, so for even in cookies that I inject via Akamai, etc., as well, we need to define why those cookies are being injected. So tomorrow, if you're using a CDN platform and if you go into the consent management space, you will need to define why you're using those cookies for whatever reason you are. And any new cookies that we add, either from a security or content delivery perspective, need to be defined. Now, why do we need to store this consent and why can't we just discard it? It's because tomorrow people can come and sue you to say that I did not give them right to give give them retargeting models, or I did not give them rights to track me, or I did not give them rights to come and say that okay, they can contact me and all of that. In that scenario, we need to prove that a user did come and in a sense give them or give us our consent to contact them or track them, or define cookies in a specific way that somebody says that I did not know this site does data tracking. Okay, so for all these specific reasons, it becomes a security problem, and these lines now start becoming very similar in the sense that how we used to look at users and we used to capture user consent. So I'm still not talking about that at the moment, but even access management onto your site, or even a visitor management onto your site, or lead generation onto your site requires consent to be stored, recorded, and be stored in a secure way. The second problem that comes up with consent is it needs to be stored locally. I can't have one sort of solution which exists for everything and I'm storing this data anywhere and everywhere I like. So for example, if you're operating in a certain country or in a certain region, you need to store that consent in that country and region. You can't have it in a specific system anywhere and everywhere. Third, this data needs to be protected because it is PII information. And if you are getting governed by policies like GDPR, etc. as well, when somebody is asking for amnesia, which is basically right to be forgotten, when you press that delete button and say that I want to terminate my account, you need to also go terminate consent. So consent data is no longer just arbitrary data. It becomes extremely confidential. It becomes extremely important for us to store this and to also look at it in a way. This is all from a user or a visitor kind of perspective. The second thing that comes up is around user profiles, or where you create accounts with people. Over there, even if you need to contact people or send notifications or send mailers or send default subscription mailers, etc. as well, you need to provide them that information or access control on that in your profile section or somewhere on your site. For example, if I don't want to be contacted tomorrow, I need to allow that a user to go ahead and do that. And we need to honor that consent. We can't say that I am going to just give them a box and I'll still keep sending them default mailers, etc. as well. Doesn't work. We need to record this consent. We need to basically look at it in a specific way, and we need to also store it securely. So now the entire user profile scenarios that we used to talk about, which used to have, say, basic PI information and let's say session information and login information and all that. In a sense, now we also have something called as consent information, and consent information can be divided in multiple spaces, can be looked at profile, can be looked at say contact where you sending notifications, and then is around data sharing activities. For example, I did not give you rights to basically look at or process my data for marketing purposes. You cannot retarget it and send it to a third party. But how do people do this and how do people still get all their way through? They use something called as standard legal disclaimers, which is basically something called as privacy policies in uh, our world, right? And why privacy policies have also started becoming a security problem nowadays is because we have multiple security tooling. And in this security tooling, we also need to define what we are going to be collecting. For example, if you have native applications for your solutions, you need to define if I have an SDK which is collecting sensor information, right? For example, if you have APIs that you have protected via Cloudflare, etc. as well, nobody does it, but you need to define that you are using, say, information for, say, website protection. So even though we capture consent, there are some default consent that we always have, and then there is some consent or some type of data that we still process. If you want to process that information without consent, you can define it in a privacy policy by saying that we're going to be collecting XXX characteristics or data, but it will not be tagged to any personal information. So I know user X came on my site, did X work, but I do not know who this X is. If you want to know user X came to your site, did X work? And if you want to know this X is actually user 10, then you need to have consent for this. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Any questions here?
So whenever this privacy, will be mandatory, then application logic needs to be modified.
In certain cases, yes. In certain cases, no. In those cases that your application is processing or collecting default information, yes, it would need to be modified. In case it is not, and you still have feature flags or something that is enabled in the sense that you can control what information you're collecting, in that case, no.
Okay. And where it will get stored, like cookies are, stored in Redis or etcd database. Servers are stateless.
Depends on your setup. If you have a consent management platform that you're building, then you will store it in a segregated data store. If you're using a third party like OneTrust, etc., it's stored at that third party layer. For example, if we are collecting consent, we store it in a separate data store altogether.
In that particular region. Let's say Europe. Not audible.
All these again. All right. So all my sites for all 11 countries have different stores for consent. Uh, they process that consent and store it in that specific region. And if somebody does ask for RTBF, which is right to be forgotten, we remove the consent also from that.
But for that 11 applications, the cookies are stored in which region?
In the region that they operate out of. For example, if Europe requires data should be in Europe, then it stays in, say, Ireland, where we operate out of. For India,
And
there
your,
is no law at the moment, so it's in Singapore.
and your pod is running in the same region?
Yes, pod is in that same region. We have to have our pods running in the same region because we require GDPR compliance to operate in Europe, etc. as well. So our entire platform is compliant there. So all our data is local to that specific uh, space.
So whenever user is coming for registration, we'll identify the geography and we'll redirect to that region.
No, so it's depending on the TLD. So the top level domain that you access, accordingly you access that specific region.
But it is possible any European citizen can access our Indian website.
They can, but if they're accessing that, then because they're accessing the Indian website, it will be stored in India. It depends on the destination region, doesn't depend where the customer is coming up from.
Oh,
It depends where
so
my business is getting served.
so in that case, GDPR is not required if European is visiting olx.co.in.
No, it's the place where you operate business in. It's not where your source customer is coming up from.
But
If
I
OLX,
heard that if you are dealing with customers' data of European region, then also it is applicable.
nope.
So for olx.co.eu or a
Yeah,
UK, whatever, then it is
yes,
required.
yes. Because then I'm
Okay.
operating in that region. But for example, if I only had one website like olx.co.in, which is also catering or is my only operating website, which is everywhere, right? If I don't have a, so for example, I have olx.com,
Hmm.
right? and it is region agnostic. So, for example, India also uses that. Europe also uses that. In that case, yes, I would need to segregate it as per targeted user who's accessing it.
Got it. Okay.
If our data say like we order something from olx.uk, so
Mhm.
like from India, someone orders from olx.uk,
Your
then
data
that
stored in your data stored in London region.
So your content will get stored, Siddharth, and you can ask to forget, right, bro?
Yeah. Yes.
But in this case, okay, means OLX has not only one serving website. Considering, then we don't have any PDPB in India, else it would have been a problem. Indian
Abs-
origin data in UK. But OLX
abs-
has Indian website, then you should use that website.
Absolutely. So it is our responsibility to give people a banner to say that, for example, if you're accessing this from Poland, right, and if you have a site in Poland, and if you open OLX.in, then it is my responsibility to show you a banner and tell you that you are in the Indian region. Should I redirect you to the Poland region? If you
Hmm.
still want to continue, that's a different thing. But we need to show that.
Got it.
yeah,
Yeah,
Amazon says that.
I have seen this banner. Yeah, I have seen.
So any site that you open, even like for example, you use Amazon.com and we have
Yes,
Amazon,
yes.
they will always tell you that hey, you need to switch to the Indian region. If you're still forced to do that, then you are applying local laws where that is operating. So for example, if you open Amazon.com, then you're applicable to US laws. Then the Indian laws take a hike.
Correct. But some of the companies, even with the co.in, their data is in US East one.
That is incorrect. So if tomorrow the bill does get passed, they will need to change that thing around. Like I don't know if you remember, some time back there was so Try had made some changes to the SMS policy where we were using vendors from external, like out of India, and they said in case you want to send SMSs to anybody in India, you will have to have your servers in India for that. So that detail had come out like a while back. Uh, Although it is still not mandated, but I'm pretty sure it will get mandated sometime soon, because every time a local policy or change comes up, they give you some time to implement it.
Okay. And how this data is managed for AWS global services? For
Okay.
India, no as such law, but for Europe,
Yeah. So all global services are only a couple of them, and they basically don't require, or they're not collecting any of your other data. So if you look at any of your global services like IAM, etc., that is still company data. Like your user will basically come there. If you're looking at user login, then you're going to be using Cognito, which is region specific. Similarly, Cloudflare or sorry, even CloudFront is region. I mean, you have a global CDN, but then it is going to be pointing to a local load balancer.
but CDN requires certificate to be stored in US East one.
That's okay. It's just regarding user data.
Okay, certificate is fine.
Yeah, it's just user data. It's not anything and everything is not there. It's just user data. PII information.
Hmm, got it.
Any questions?
No.
All right. Okay, folks. Let's just open up our AWS accounts then, and we'll start with setting up some databases and speaking about backups.
That ELK work is done.
Sorry,
ELK.
we will be looking at that in a bit. I just want to cover a few things and we look at that.
Okay, then I'll log in everything.
So whenever you have logged in, you can just go to your region and open Amazon RDS. What we'll do is we'll set up a database and we look at how we can look at backups, etc. here. Just let me know once you've logged in and you're here. I'll start.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm there.
Okay, all right, cool. So once you're on the database screen, just click on create database. You can go to standard create, and if you're more familiar with MySQL, just click on MySQL. If you're more familiar with any other source, you can select that source. For now, you can just see MySQL, or let's just use a common thing. Uh, in templates, just select free tier over here. In database instance identifier, you can just add the name. In password, you can type whatever password you want. Instant configuration you can leave as is. Storage you can leave as is. Availability and durability you can leave as is.
VPC subnet, what we put, sir?
In existing VPC, you can just add, you can just select the standard here. In VPC security groups, you can leave this on default.
Or VPC subnets also default.
Yeah. Availability zone, you can select if you want any preference, but you can leave it as is. You don't need to change anything here. Database authentication, you can leave it as is. If you want a
But
default,
AZ we need to select, no?
sorry, you can leave it on no preference. It will pick up any of them, any one of them.
So this is not required to be in private subnet or a public.
No. So just in public access, just select yes so that you get the public route of that. VPC you leave as is. VPC security group you leave as is.
Generally in production that remains no, right? Public access.
Yes, absolutely. We're just doing it so that we can
Yeah.
basically access it. Database options and initial database name, you can just type in anything that you want. In backups, just untick this for now. We will do this in a little bit. You can keep encryption enabled. The rest, you don't need to do anything. You can just click on create database after that. So just going over it again. You go to standard create, you select MySQL, select free tier, give a DB name, define your password. I think I've got what I wrote.
It failed for public.
It failed for public.
Yeah, specified VPC does not support DNS resolution host command.
I selected default.
I selected public.
No, the VPC and the that subnets all default for me.
It shouldn't fail like
Yeah.
that.
VPC, I selected the VPC which we were working.
Let's see.
You selected VPC through, so instead of that, we'll select default I had instead of that.
But I'll just change that to create, just create a new VPC there.
But the new VPC will also not have DNS host name.
It'll create it, it'll push it there. If you put create, if you say create new VPC, it'll push it there. That's because while creating the VPC, we didn't allow DNS resolution there. So we can either go enable it, which I'll show you how to do it later. But for now, just select create new VPC.
I've selected default. I hope it is fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it is creating.
In the meantime, I'll just show you why that wasn't working. Was because number one, so because DNS host names are disabled here. So either if we go here and we edit DNS host names and we enable this, then we'll be able to create it in this. You can try it out later by creating another one. So you can just say enable and edit DNS resolution will automatically be enabled here. So if you enable this, it will work. Now I'll show you if we just create. And this time if we select this and say public access, so it'll work now.
So shall I do or leave it?
You can either way, it doesn't matter. I was just showing you why that error was coming.
So now DB is in separate VPC and our previous thing is in separate VPC.
Yeah, but we just need to, I mean, I can show you what we're going to be doing, so we won't require that.
Okay, else we'll do VPC peering.
Cool. Just let this create. Once this does start creating, what you will see is just check this default VPC security group that you have has inbound access for 3306. So this has basically all traffic. So that's good. Secondly, what we need to look at is this is fine. Proxies are not required. Perfect. Let this just come up in the public URL.
So the security gap had all traffic, sir. Did you change anything there?
Nothing. I didn't change anything. Ideally, we should only be allowing 3306.
3306, yeah.
But for now, once this is created, you will get something as an endpoint and port, and then we can just use our terminal to connect to it, or if you have the MySQL workbench or whatever.
Yeah, I have that benchmark. Workbench.
Yes.
Available now. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm just going to be using my terminal. If you have the workbench, you can use the workbench as well. Share my screen again. First things first, I'll just try a telnet and see if I have connectivity here.
For Windows user, I need to use putty.
You can use workbench or you can use putty as well. Yeah, you can use putty as well.
Without certificate.
It should just work on the username password because we haven't set cert authentication.
And port would be 3306.
Yes, that is correct.
Seems like no connectivity, sir.
Yeah, just checking.
And also see. Failed on workbench.
Yeah, mine also connection timed out.
Yep, we'll just check. It just has to do with the default security group. Just remove the default rule and just add a IPv4 access on it. So basically, in this security group that you have, this basically had another inbound rule from a security group rule. Just edit it.
3306, I just added it, that one.
Yeah, you can just delete this or just add 3306 from anywhere. It should work.
I just added with that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Either will work. Why is my sharing not working? Just give me a second. I'm just installing the MySQL command. If you're finding it difficult to install this or you don't have the MySQL command with you, what you can do is just go back to our instances which we had launched last time and just start any one of them, add it behind the NLB and use SSH, and we can just install MySQL on this.
I added 3306, but still not able to connect.
You just share your screen and show me.
Yeah, it
Remote side unexpectedly closed.
the site in the how port did you change to 3306 in the putty?
Oh, changed, I guess.
The putty sir, how will it connect on 3306 generally? It's for
You will need to give the certificate for that. It can connect, but you will need to give the
I guess
certificate.
it's better to have like SQL as you told, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you can just boot up the machine as well and use it via NLB also, and just install MySQL there as a command. Or just boot up the machine only and use that. I think it'll be easier.
Which machine?
The one we had added behind the NLB, any one of them you can use. You'll get SSH access into that, right? Or you can just install MySQL Workbench on your machine.
Yeah,
Either.
best install that.
But this is in separate VPC, no?
So best is just because it's public, right? Doesn't make a difference as long as you have internet connectivity, it'll work.
So MySQL Workbench.
Yeah,
Yep.
just download that is much better to work.
This is working, right? Can you check? I'll share my screen. This is working, no?
Yeah, just add a colon dot exclamation after that. Just fire the query once. Yeah, working. Just let me get it up and running.
Dhruv, I'll share my screen. Trying to connect. You see my screen?
Yes, not yet. Wait. Yeah, now I can see it.
Okay. A little help do go here. I'm not sure how to use SQL workbench.
Go to database.
Okay.
Connect.
Connect to
Connect.
database. In host name, that endpoint name.
Yes, that I have put it. Actually, I've done that.
Username admin.
Admin.
Store in vault. Click
Okay.
and enter your password.
Yeah.
Enter your password.
This I have done it. It didn't work actually.
You check.
Okay.
Then just go back to the AWS account and see. Can you just open your DB once on AWS till this is happening?
Yes.
Can you just click on VPC security groups? Yeah, just click on that. Just click on inbound rules. Can you just share your DNS name here on the chat once for the C2 instance?
Yeah.
Ouch. Why are you getting a private IP? You're in US West 2. Let me just check. Did you not select the public option?
Mm,
You're resolving to
I think
a private IP, which is 3.68. Just 1 second, let me check. I'll just share my screen. Show you what I'm seeing.
Yeah, here it is not public.
Yep, you've created a private one, that's why. You can access this from the machine, but I would just suggest you,
Create a new one.
yeah, I'll just see if I can edit it. I don't think I can
That
because
is not modifiable, sir, that option.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. I tried that, but it was telling something to be changed in VPC.
yeah, I'm just doing that. So in VPC, if you want this to work, you have to go to your VPC settings.
Yeah.
I'll just show you. Go to your VPCs, select this VPC, go to actions, edit DNS host names, and just tick enable DNS host names. Once you do this, go back to RDS.
Then you have to connect to the private instance and from there MySQL.
Yes, so that is one way of doing it, but
But
we'll launch it.
but in my VPC, I see that it is enabled already.
What region are you in? I'm doing it in your VPC only right now. I'm in Oregon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yes.
So I've just changed it to public. Let's see. Still going to private IPs. Just give it some time. Okay, so this is just modifying. Once it modifies, you will be able to connect in the same way. I think it's just going to change the DNS now to a public IP.
Okay.
Yep, so the DNS has been destroyed. It should start coming up. Just check now. You just share your screen.
Yeah.
Just use your workbench again and see if you can connect. Still can't tell net on this. Hang on. Just hang on. I can't tell net on that for some reason. Cool. Can you check now, please?
Yeah. Yeah, disconnected.
Cool. Sounds good.
What went wrong?
So DNS propagation was there, plus you were selected to connect this into a private subnet. So the subnet values that you selected was one of them was in a private subnet. So I changed the private subnet from the NAT gateway to the IGW, so it started working.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Now that we can connect to our databases as well, so once you have your databases up and running, the next thing that we would want to look at is how we can back these up and how do we basically restore from these backups as well. Because eventually all your data is going to reside in databases or S3, right? S3 is a global service, so it provides automatic failover and restoration and backups for the data, so you don't need to worry about backing this up. But for example, tomorrow if I'm running in Mumbai and Mumbai region goes down for some reason, I will basically be facing a problem there. So what we're going to do is we're going to first just see how we can back these instances up. So just click on your instance, click on maintenance and backup. You will see backups are currently disabled, and you will also see replicate to region is blank, replicated automatic backup is blank, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to modify this. This comes straight down to backup. Now what you will see over here is something called as backup retention period. So basically how many days do you want your backup to be kept? So for example, if I just say 1 day for now, right? You choose a window where you want to start your backup at what time UTC and how long should this complete in. So for example, we say, okay, take 1 hour, and for UTC time, what is the time right now? 7:20, right? So let's just put this as 7:25 UTC, right? So this basically will start in 5 minutes. We don't need anything else here, and we just click on continue. So two things I've changed. I've kept a backup retention period, and I've chosen a window which basically starts in like 3 to 4 minutes from now. And the max duration I've just given 1 hour for this to take a backup. You click on continue and say modify.
You said the backup window and maintenance window must not overlap.
Yeah. So just change your maintenance day over here to something other than this. Just select apply immediately in scheduling of modifications, otherwise it's going to take some time. And let this modify.
In maintenance window, what we entered,
Just change it
the
to
instance.
anything. I just changed it to Friday.
I changed to 1 day and all still failing.
Just share your screen, please.
So I changed this maintenance window. I made it like something like Tuesday.
Okay, just go back up 1 second. That's fine. You can leave the time as is. Yeah, just change this to 1. 504. Just change this to 7:30 now. Yeah, just come down. Just change the start time to something later, like uh, say 12 or something. Yeah, just change it there. That's fine. Just say continue. Yeah, just say apply.
Yeah, no.
Cool. So your maintenance window time and your backup time was overlapping.
Time, okay, but
nothing has came in pending maintenance.
Uh, did you select apply immediately, or did you select
Yes.
do it apply maintenance window?
No, apply immediately I selected.
So this should basically be modifying if you've changed that. Just share your screen again. Okay, you selected the maintenance window, yeah, so that's why it's doing that. So just go to modify again.
I selected Saturday.
So on the last step, you just have to select apply immediately.
That I did.
It's showing up in the maintenance window for some reason. Just go back to databases once and just click on actions.
Okay, it is still modifying.
Okay, then that means it's doing it.
Okay.
It takes some time.
Let's see.
Okay, so for example, this time period has now happened for me. So in automated backups, you will see that this is basically taken a region backup for me here right now. So this should be in available state after you modified, and just go to automated backups and you should see a current region backups over here.
so where are the backups stored?
On AWS Cloud.
I mean, in S3 or like RDS storage only?
No, it's on AWS Cloud. We don't know what, like where it's stored. If you want to configure where it's stored, there is something called as an AWS backup service.
Okay.
In this, you can define where you want to store it. So basically, you have a vault, and in that vault, you can store that there. So it depends how you want to do it. This basically just stores it to AWS Cloud, and they take your charge from you for that. The backup service basically, then you can define what all resources do you want, how frequently do you want it to run, and all that. So currently, you can take backups using, I mean, you can take backups of these services at the moment.
So these are not charged?
They're charged, but this is more configurable. So where I want to store it, if I want to take it cross region, if I want to store it in, like take it in this region, store it in a different region, do like how frequently do I want to move it to cold storage? So you can do all of that. We'll come here also, don't worry. And then like this is just encrypted by the KMS key. This is basically you have your own vault where you can store this. So you have double protection there. Your backup is encrypted, and then you can lock your vault. So the these backups cannot be set in a Vora mode, which is basically write once, read anywhere, right? In AWS backup, you can put it into worm mode as well. So then nobody can even tamper your backups in that scenario. So you just write it once, you can't delete it. Even if I'm an admin, then I can't go delete it. Then if I want to delete it, actually I'll have to go open a case with Amazon, prove my ownership, and then only they delete it. So the different thing, I mean, this is just like a default kind of backup where I don't have a very complicated use case. But for example, you want Waterlock or you want a worm model or a Vora model, then basically you have to apply it over there.
Still modifying, and in 1 minute it kicks off the schedule.
That's okay. Hopefully should be done. Path your modification is done, still happening.
Let me check. Yeah, still it is happening, but in automated backup, I can see one.
So then it's basically creating a backup then.
Yeah, it is creating.
Okay, cool.
We can take a break if required.
It's okay, we'll just wait for this. We'll just do the restoration, then we can break for lunch itself. It shouldn't take that long, there's hardly any size.
Yeah, mine got available, but not sure like it got available before backup kicked or
You will
there is
see
a
it here. In automated backups, you'll see the last restorable time.
yeah, I
So
see it. Yes.
if that last restorable time is there, then that means it's successfully done it.
Okay.
So basically what this means is it started it at this time, right? And the last row that was written was at 725. So anything at 725.01 will not be available in this backup.
Mine both times are same, earliest and latest.
Okay, so then that means it's just taken a spot backup in that case.
Changed now actually.
Sorry?
It changed at that time now. It
Okay,
was
cool.
updating
Cool.
the
Sounds
backup.
yeah. So if this is done for everybody, you can just click on actions and click on restore to point in time, but just make sure your instance is available before that. If it's still modifying, this won't work.
Then in maintenance window, what happens? Like the database goes down and they take the backup, or is it running? It takes the backup.
Performance gets degraded, but it'll take the backup.
I mean,
So then,
database will still be active.
yeah. So this is currently not the right way we set it up. So normally databases are in multi-AZs and we have multiple readers and writers, right? So what it does is it keeps the writer and one reader enabled, and of one reader it starts taking the backup. So you might see a certain performance evaluation or performance hit, but it will not take it down. So if you come to restore point in time, you will see that this is the last backup time that this is available. Also, if you want to restore it to a custom date and time that you want, you can just set up the date and time over here, right? DB instance identifier is something which you can say that I want to create a new DB out of this. So basically you put in the new DB name here. So for example, I just put in everything else, we remain and we keep it the same way. We don't change anything here. We just tick public access again. And that's about it. So once you do that, it will just create another database from the backup that you've got.
The database name initial that is required.
Yeah, it is required. So it creates a new database from the backup, right? So you need to give the DB identifier name.
Yeah, DB identifier I gave. There is one more database name. Should it be matching the last one or initial database name?
No, not required, nothing. You can leave it blank. That's basically if you want to just create a default database in
Schema
the,
type.
yeah.
Yeah, it is creating the other one.
Perfect. So folks, this is not the way we do backups. I'm just telling you, like, this is a very rough way of doing backups, that if you don't want to use AWS backup service, that is where we use this. This is also limited in the type of databases you select. So this is only available for Aurora and RDS. That is basically the Amazon database. So this is available here and in MySQL. That's all. So if you look at any other one, Postgres doesn't have this option. You have to use the backup service itself. And I think SQL Server also doesn't have this option. So it depends. This is like a very rough way of doing backups. The other way I will show you why the AWS backup service itself. Okay, if this is getting created, in the meantime, just come to AWS backup. You can click on create backup plan. If you want, you can use a template that basically says it backs up daily, monthly till 1 year, or daily for 35 days retention. So you can just select anyone. If you want to build your own custom plan, then you can just click on build a plan. This you can define if you want to create a new vault. How frequently do you want to backup? Uh, do you want to use backup windows, or do you want to like do it at any point in time? Options here are to transition to cold storage as well. So after how many days do you want to send it to cold storage? How many days do you want to read there? And then there's an option called copy to destination. So here, for example, if I have my data stores in Mumbai and if my backup region is someplace else, I can actually go ahead and copy this database backup to a different region. Now, for example, Mumbai entirely goes down, right? Then what I can do is I can go into the different region and I can still use the AWS backup service to spawn that backup up. So AWS backup is more used from a perspective of point in time recoveries as well, and for disaster recovery also. So whatever resources are backed up here, and if I've got a target region that I keep, then if I go in that target region, I will be able to see this backup in that target region under here. So if I go to the backup vault and if I go to protected resources, currently this is blank. If I select a backup resource and I select this, say for example, if somebody is working in Virginia and I select Mumbai as a backup region, I will see this backup here. Now, when this backup exists over here, I will still show you how we can basically get it up and running. But when we have this backup over here, we can basically just restore this in any other region, or say for example, if you copied it in Mumbai, you can restore this in Mumbai now and launch it. For example, if I copied my backup here in Virginia, then I can just go to Virginia and launch it there, considering even the full Mumbai region is down. Does this make sense?
but there will be some data loss, right? So like in the backup
Yeah,
last taken.
absolutely. There will be definitely there will
So
be a
there is
data.
no kind of like how to
There
say
is you can spawn it
real-time
across.
streaming. Yeah.
See, anyways, a disaster happening like a full region going down is say 1 in a million years kind of thing
Yeah, yeah,
happen,
that's
right? Availability zones can go down, yes. So that's why we generally keep it multi-easy, where we deploy it in say 1A, 1B, and 1C. So one availability zone fully going down is still, I would say, highly improbable, but maybe happens. Two of them going down is, I say, even like more improbable. But if like all three or the entire region is going down, that is then like a complete catastrophe. And at that point in time, I'm sure we will not be worried about data loss, but just to get a site backup.
yes. So the three availability zone for the database will be spinning up. So those three will be in sync.
Yeah, all three of them will be in sync. If you select, like, if we go to create here again, to show that to you.
Yeah, we selected the free tier, but again, if you select the production one, that was giving
If you
options, right?
select production and if you come down over here, so where you say create an Aurora replica or reader node in a different availability zone, right? So it basically creates a reader node somewhere else as well, right? So if you spawn it in 1A, it'll create it in 1B as well. So you'll have two zones running. Even if one of them goes down, the database will still be up. And
Okay.
that is in constant sync. So there's no data loss there. Cool. Folks, we'll come back and we'll start with AWS backups then. We'll just break for lunch and then we'll start with backups. We'll move on to SSO and then we'll just finish up with KMS as well.
Okay.
Cool. I'll see
So
you
we'll back by.
back by about 2:30.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, folks.